This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com. This show is brought to you by IndyWrestling.us. Check out IWC, RWA, and more. And listeners like you, support this show at patreon.com/Wrestling Mayhem Show.
Hungry as fuck, but I ain't starving yet. Chain for the pain, cocktail dog set. Never said I was a gangster or thug, but I'm an animal. Beating for the taste of the blood.
Hey guys, it is the Indy Mayhem Show. The show where we talk with people in and around independent professional wrestling here in Sorgatron Media Studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Again, before we get into our interview today, please check out everything at WrestlingMayhemShow.com where you can find out this and other great podcasts that we're doing around professional wrestling. We have a lot of fun with the Wrestling Mayhem Show. Even recently, if you're hearing this as it's coming out, we just did a debate, because that seems to be the popular thing right now over there, that we had a lot of fun, and it was very civil for a wrestling podcast. So put that out there. Also, please check out IndyWrestling.us, where you'll see a lot of people in action that we talk to on this very show as part of that, in IndyWrestling.network, and of course, Fight Underground, that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit as well, and including some action from another promotion that our guest tonight is a part of, and that is Dash Bennett, joining us rare these days, it seems, in studio with us right now. How you doing, Dash?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the nice spread that you had in the green room. Although I want to know who puts pickles on a deli tray. I mean, it's amateur.
We will. Listen, man. It's a hard time for everybody right now, and we're still sorting that out. But you got all your green M&Ms, correct?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us here, Dash.
Sure.
So the first question, a little break the ice question for those who don't know you, maybe know your history as well. We try to get started with what was your earliest memory of professional wrestling?
So my earliest memory, I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia, and in the 80s and early 90s still, it was a real hotbed for WWF wrestling. They were at the Wheeling Civic Center multiple times throughout the year doing tapings.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember very, very vaguely, I was maybe 3 or 4, and my dad had taken me to an event there. And I know that it was the one where they had the Hogan and Savage steel cage, because all I remember are those big blue bars.
Was this is just them? Was it the no holds barred one, or is this one of their?
All I remember is just seeing that big blue cage.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better memory of it, but I had to have been like 3 or 4 at the time. My dad actually tells a story any chance he gets. I guess I must have wandered off at some point towards the locker room, and the Iron Sheik was standing somewhere outside of the locker room, and I had gotten his attention, and he was, I guess, making goofy faces or trying to, get a laugh out of me as a 3-year-old. So he likes to tell that story a lot. But aside from that, I wasn't really a wrestling fan growing up. Not until I was in high school, 95, like fall of 95. I was just flipping through the channels on the TV looking for something to watch, and I landed on Nitro, where Hogan, Sting, and Savage were doing a promo to build to War Games. And what better 3 people to grab your attention than them? And I just kept watching. And then I just started tuning in every week, became aware of WWF very soon thereafter. And for Christmas that year, my dad got me a PWI magazine, and that's where I realized that there was wrestling outside of those 2 promotions. I learned about ECW, I learned about the independents, so that really opened my eyes. And from that point on, very quickly, I was very hooked and very all things wrestling.
Mm-hmm. And that was like the only way, it seemed at the time, to get those kinds of outside of the major companies, right?
Yeah,
was those
absolutely.
PWI magazines?
Yeah, I mean, it was pre-internet. I mean, the internet was very, very newly a thing. I remember at one point that I was trying to email ECW, convincing them to run at the Wheeling Civic Center, and that never happened. But there wasn't that big online presence like there is today. There certainly wasn't social media, so you had to rely on those kinds of magazines to learn about the world outside of the big 2 or the big 3.
So going from that, so you're in your teenage years, you're kind of grabbing back on. It's probably the perfect time for that. You're in this,
it was the Attitude Era. It was the Monday Night Wars, and I mean, really being a high school kid, that was probably the best,
that
the
speaks
absolute
to
best
you.
time,
Yeah.
because you would go to school and everyone there, no matter who they were, what clique they were a part of or what popularity level they were at, everyone was all about wrestling. So it was something that could kind of transcend cliques and transcend popularity. Because the captain of the football team would walk down the hallway, and if he saw you wearing a DX shirt, he'd throw you a crotch chop. So yeah, it was a great time, absolutely.
Oh man, I wish I was in that school. I don't feel like wrestling was quite as open ended as it was for some of these other guys. My school was not nearly as cool. So how did you get transitioned to your experience? You see in the WWF down there in Wheeling. How did you kind of discover, like, did you want to get into it, or discovered that there was a possibility to get into it with local promotions?
So the very first thing that I did was, because I was such a fan of wrestling, I wanted to join the wrestling team in middle school at that point, in 8th grade. And very cliche, I showed up and was very surprised that it was a mat on the floor and not a ring with ropes. But I was on the wrestling team through high school. I had an opportunity to attend a few independent events. I remember Pennsylvania Wrestling Federation, the promotion with George South and Italian Stallion, ran at the Civic Center, and they had a bunch of names for that show. They had like Eddie and Hector Guerrero, Haku, Ted DiBiase, the Rock and Roll Express, and after the show, or after it had ended, and Ted DiBiase closed the show with a promo, a bunch of people in the audience that were still there got inside the ring and started like jumping around and stuff, and that was kind of my first experience stepping into a wrestling ring. And by that point, I had been very aware of other independent promotions. I would stay up Saturday nights at midnight to watch ECW, and then there would be like a hour or 2 hour block of paid programming where you would see all of the independent shows. So you would see things like Urban Wrestling Federation. Urban Wrestling was great. It was a bunch of sorry, this is going to be politically incorrect, but it was a bunch of white guys that were baby faces. Or sorry, a bunch of black guys that were baby faces, white guys that were heels, and they were feuding over hip hop.
Yes.
There
Sounds
would be
very 90s.
There was a sign posted on the wall that said "No hip hop beyond this point," and Orlando Jordan was one of the wrestlers there that was feuding with some guy over a tag team title that his father had won years ago. There was this weird promotion where they wrestled in rounds. There was this weird promotion where they showed a clip of a New Japan Road Warriors match every week. And there was Pro Wrestling XPress. Let's just get this out of the way now. I'm going to be talking about PWX, and I'm going to be talking about Black Diamond Wrestling. I know that those are sore subjects, especially in 2020, but there's no way to talk about my journey without talking about those promotions. So let's
and that's fair.
just
That's
get
fair.
that out of the way here right now. But
One second. I think the mic kind of dropped on you to kind of point it back up at you over there. There you go.
Does it tighten at all?
It should be fine. I think it just kind of.
I don't know if this is tightening or not. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So, all right. Let me give you a transition back in.
Okay.
But yeah, so definitely. I mean, that's part of that. Like, but that was your journey. This is a part of your journey. Not anymore, but that was part of your journey.
Yeah.
Over the years.
So let's fast forward a couple of years. When I was in high school, I became friends with a kid named Derek, who would go on to become my tag team partner, Darren Smythe. We were known as the premier players for the first few years of my career. So we met because we were both on the wrestling team when I was a sophomore and he was a freshman, and we bonded over wrestling during a meet one day. And we would often sneak into the wrestling room right after the bell let out for 8th period and before anyone else got in there for practice, and we would just wrestle, meaning we would be doing rock bottoms and elbow drops and stone cold stunners, and other people that were on the team would actually join in when they came in. So we were doing, we were just doing all of these professional wrestling moves, and until our coach came in and he's like, "Oh, you guys are doing that studio wrestling."
Which shows his age that he was referring to it as a studio wrestling, right?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know what studio wrestling was until years later, but
yeah.
So Derek, was only in the wrestling team for that 1 year, and we were really, really close friends throughout high school, except for 1 year where I was just an asshole and started a fight that didn't need to be started, and we didn't talk for a year. But when we crossed paths again, he said, "Hey, I've been training to wrestle." So he had met Rick Barncourt, or Rick Diamond, as you may know. And
you know what? I worked with that guy for like almost 2 years. I never knew his real last name.
Yeah, there you go. But they had been training with him and the late Stormtrooper, him and a few other friends that went to our school. And
I got to roll back. Stormtrooper.
Yeah.
What kind of gimmick was Stormtrooper?
I mean, he wrestled in camo pants. He was an army guy, I guess.
Okay, I was afraid he was doing a Star Wars stuff.
No. No, he was bald head, beard, camo pants, tank top.
Okay.
Yeah. But they had been trained and had wrestled on a few shows. They had gone up and worked for Aaron Lester up in Pittsburgh, and I went to one of their shows at the barn in Moundsville, West Virginia, which was Corey Graves' first match. And shortly after that, I started training with them. They had. Rick was running at the time the World Independent Wrestling Federation, or WIWF. He basically recruited a bunch of high school or recent high school graduates around our area to train us to wrestle for him, but also used a few Pittsburgh guys like Jake Garrett, Jefferson Allen or Nikita Alanoff, Kid Ego, Todd Thompson, and then some West Virginia guys like Punchy McGee and Chick Scott. And he
Punchy McGee.
Punchy
Did I hear that
McGee.
right? Okay.
Yes.
This is a whole section of area wrestlers I've never heard of.
Oh, I could tell you stories.
Nikita
for hours.
Alanoff. I actually was coming across some old RWA footage the other day, and Nikita Alanoff was on that.
See, I never knew he wrestled for RWA.
Yeah, very early, like 2011, 2012.
Okay. Well, back then his gimmick was he wore an Ohio State T-shirt and he was called Jefferson Allen.
Oh. Okay, that's different.
And it's okay. I can bust his balls because we used to be roommates. So he ran that. He ran shows at the Roller Derby in Moundsville, West Virginia, which is a building with a ceiling shorter than the room that we're in right now.
And we have a good, 10, 12 foot ceiling in this room. But just
it was a little short. I know it was shorter because he had to cut down the poles in the ring, but he cut them from the bottom. So that the ring was literally a step off of the ground.
Oh no.
Yes. And you still couldn't stand on the top rope.
Jeez.
I think you could barely stand on the middle rope. So it wasn't a building that was designed for wrestling, but we made the most of it and wrestled there until the ring broke one day, which I guess you can't believe if you cut the poles from the bottom. But Rick
that doesn't do anything structural to that at all, right?
No, but Rick ended up selling that ring to Aaron Lester, who was running Three Rivers Wrestling at this point in East Liberty, and Aaron ended up putting that ring in his living room.
wait.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Wait, how big was this ring again? What size was it?
Probably 16 foot.
Okay. What kind of
I'd say
living room
16.
did he get?
At most, it was 16 feet. It might have been smaller than that. I mean,
okay.
It was a homemade ring. And Rick's made his own rings, his own wooden rings for a number of years. And, would always make them low to the ground so they could accommodate any kind of building.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, he sold this ring to Aaron Lester. Wow. And that was, we actually went up for a Three Rivers Wrestling show. It was my first experience in Pittsburgh. And me, not even 10 matches into the business or a full year into the business at that point, main evented a Three Rivers Wrestling show with 0 paying fans, maybe like 20 or 30 kids that they invited in, from the community. And oh God, so they had a one-night tournament that was won by Rico Revolver, who would go on to be Glenn Spector. and me as the heel came out and attacked him, beat him down after the match, got a babyface pop, and ended up wrestling later the three-verse champion Mike McGowan with Stacey Hunter.
Who is still wrestling. I just saw a
He
few
was
months
the
ago.
Soul Keeper at
Yeah,
that point.
he's a Soul Keeper.
The Soul
Yeah,
Keeper.
I knew he's a man of many gimmicks.
Yes,
from what I understand.
The Soul Keeper, where he was a 5'9" Undertaker.
Okay, all right.
And I can bust his balls, too. Because
listen, man, I saw an Undertaker, a hot dog Undertaker, a couple of weeks ago. So, I mean,
but we main evented that show, and I think I was able to watch it back a number of years later, and it was awful in the sense that it had no psychology, but we just went out there and kind of beat each other up. And afterwards, Aaron Lester deemed that I was the future of professional wrestling.
Oh yeah,
yes. But that led to some other good opportunities.
And I guess for context, I've heard curious stories about Aaron Lester, if I have the name right.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, I don't really know too much about him. I worked a couple promotions or a couple shows for him when I first started out. He was always a nice guy. He had some shady business partners.
That's what I understand. Yeah.
But I never had an issue with him. I had great experiences.
So if this sounds wild, it just I guess a little extra context. So and it is, but I think it's interesting because I mean this is what you had available.
Yeah.
To come in on, and not everybody, especially in that era, has that access of having a not the I want to say good legitimate wrestling company to kind of build with.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say that in a way to demean what you had available, but access to that and talent and a different kind of show, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for me, trying to get bookings, there was a show that ran somewhere in Ohio, near where I was. I want to say maybe it was OCW, Jeff Cannon's promotion.
Okay.
And
still run too. Yeah.
We didn't have social media again.
Yeah.
So a little hard to get in contact with other promoters or even find out about other promotions.
Didn't even have MySpace yet.
No. So what I did was I saw a flyer.
Mm-hmm.
I got the phone number for tickets, or phone number for the building off the flyer, and got the email address for the promoter, and emailed him, telling him who I was, how long I've been working, all of that, trying to get booked on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, his response was, come to the show and we'll talk. And I just ended up buying a ticket and watching. But it was, I got to see even colder Mike Austin. So
even colder
well
Mike Austin.
Yes.
I'd probably buy a ticket for that.
Yes.
Actually. Yeah, I think I've bought tickets on my travels for shows where I'm like, I gotta see what this is about.
Yeah. It was about even colder.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, so again, a year into the business, I worked a few shows for Aaron Lester. Rick had stopped running at that point. I started getting booked for Mason Dixon Wrestling in West Virginia for Jim Hawkins, which was probably one of my favorite experiences. I worked for him for a few years until he stopped running. But we would go down and I would be paired with Darren Smythe. We'd work tag matches, and we'd just be given, go out there and do whatever. So we'd go out and work like 20, 30-minute tag team matches. Old school West Virginia crowd was into it the whole time. Okay. And, we'd go and, we'd just have fun and, just work. We'd do 2 hot tags every night, and it got over. So those were awesome.
You had your formula.
Yeah, exactly.
And you probably didn't have to kill yourself doing that either.
No.
Yeah.
No, they were. It was good fun. They were good shows. Like I said, very old school. It's where I met and wrestled Shirley Doe for the first time. They were always great, fantastic shows, and really good, really hot crowds. So I was able to get connected through Aaron Lester to a promotion in West Virginia called In Your Face Wrestling, or IYFW, that used a lot of the same crew and would go on to use more of more Pittsburgh guys that worked PWX and IWC. Okay,
it's a name I've definitely heard over the years.
They ran for a couple years out of a abandoned storefront in Weirton, West Virginia. So you know, much like the building that we're in, maybe, you know, back a little further. But it was, you know, it was very narrow. You could put, you know, you could put a few rows of chairs on either side of the ring, but not the side.
Yeah, yeah.
You would usually have, you'd usually find yourself hitting the wall with your back as you ran the ropes because the ring was right up against the wall. But it was around that time that IWC became a thing. That's another story for another day and probably told by somebody that was actually there. But short story was that a group of guys had broken off from PWX and started IWC, which was started by Bubba the Bulldog and later taken over by Norm Connors.
And we do have a conversation with Bubba the Bulldog. I think we had him back in within the last year talking about the growth, that becoming a thing in the early years of IWC, if people want to check that out as well.
Yeah. So I had come in right after that, and I think there were two people that didn't go to IWC or didn't work that show where they broke off, and one of them was Jefferson Allen or Nikita Alanoff. He had stayed loyal to Jim Miller and to PWX, and Jim had gotten a new building on Walnut Street in McKeesport, which would become the Sportatorium. So what we ended up doing, me, Derek, and another of our friends from Wheeling, is we would go up on the weekends and we would help move everything from Jim's storage shed into that building and then work out in the ring for a couple of hours. And we would do that for weeks and weeks until one day Jim came down, saw us working out in the ring, and asked if we wanted to work a show. So they were starting back up at that building, and they ran a show in Dravosburg at a fire department. And that was my first time wrestling for PWX. Got a tryout match, me versus Darren Smythe, and we were given the green light to join the promotion after that. And I would go on to wrestle there for another 12 years.
Nice longevity at least, right? So tell me about a little bit of that experience. So you went through a few different phases, I understand, through PWX's years, but this is kind of like the most established place that you had, the most consistency from the sounds of things.
They were running bi-weekly, and they were doing that bi-weekly schedule for years. And there were other opportunities out of that because they were a member of the NWA at the time. So I had opportunities from that to go and wrestle for Rich Arpin, who ran NWA Tri-State in West Virginia, Rick O'Brien, who ran NWA Virginia out of Virginia. We were traveling all over the state of West Virginia, all over the state of Ohio, working shows in Cleveland for NEPW, for Ed Schmidt, for Jeff Traxler, MCW. I mean, at that point, through like 2001 through 2003, I could probably count on one hand a weekend where I didn't have a show or a weekend where I didn't have at least a double shot. So we were getting pretty solid work. So when I was 2-3 years in the business, I'd had maybe like 250 matches under my belt at that point.
Wow.
And it helped that we were being paired and being booked as a tag team. So we were known as the premier players, and just by virtue of us, being a team, which there weren't a lot at that time. There were, in Pittsburgh, there were two teams. There was us, and there was Sexual Harassment, JT Rogers and Eric Ecstasy. And actually, when we wrestled in CWF, we got paired together and put on some great matches. We had a few stingers, but a lot of fun working with those guys. But probably through like 2003, like I said, a lot of success early on. Around that time in PWX, they broke us off as a tag team. Gave Darren a singles push and wanted to see what I could do as a singles. And I was told that I wasn't really catching on. I wasn't really getting over. I needed to come up with a gimmick, and that led to a dark couple of years where I was just saddled with some pretty shitty gimmicks. One where I had to take 10 unprotected chair shots to the head.
Oh,
yeah, in one night, and subsequently, additional every show after that, where I became known as concussion prone Dash Bennett. Where basically my gimmick was I was Eugene about 4 months before Eugene debuted. on WWE television.
No.
Yeah, that was pretty awful. I joined an evil fraternity that was led by Kid Cupid and consisted of me and Sean Dahmer or Sean Resnick. And we feuded with the Tri-Chi fraternity, QB Blitz and Sam the Hammer Sledge. But we were the evil fraternity of the mentally challenged, basically, because I was still playing off the concussion prone. And from there, I was put under a mask where we were told to do a new version of the tag team Armageddon. So Armageddon was a team that was, and I can say this now because they're both retired, whatever.
Yeah.
Boomer Payne and Crusher Hansen would wrestle under masks as the team Armageddon. They would wear matching Piroth masks, the black and yellow, if you can picture it, and hockey jerseys and basketball shorts. And they were basically a comedy tag team. They would do a lot of WWE finishers in their matches, a lot of comedy. But we were a heel version of that, which meant that we couldn't do comedy. We couldn't do the finishing moves. We wore masks so we couldn't talk, and we wore army fatigues. So really, the only thing that kept us Armageddon was the masks, and it just wasn't getting over, and it went on way too long, a lot longer than it should have.
So kind of forgot. So I a lot of people say you hear this a lot with WWE kind of stuff, like getting saddled with a weird gimmick and you just kind of make it work.
Yeah.
These were not working. There was a lot of effort put into these, right?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I probably could have embraced it more, and I probably, looking back, I probably could have found a way to make it work, but
just nothing was clicking.
It wasn't clicking. Me and Resnick were saddled together as a tag team because we had similar body types.
Yeah.
But we had absolutely no chemistry as a team whatsoever. We went on to have better chemistry as opponents years later, but just we were teamed together just by virtue of being two big guys, and that would happen no matter where we went. I wrestled for Kato and KCW around 04, 05, and those were really good shows. But he put us together as a tag team. We weren't doing any kind of gimmicks, so we were just being ourselves. Well, he was kind of doing his crazy gimmick still, but everyone felt the need to pair us together as a tag team, and it didn't work. So, at the time, I was still working for other promotions. Again, still going to West Virginia and Ohio, still working for Black Diamond Wrestling, and doing a lot of really good stuff there. Darren had left for Florida. He had moved down there after college, and I was then paired with Dan Sandwich as a tag team partner.
Okay.
And we were in the middle of a feud with the Gambino Brothers.
Okay.
In Black Diamond Wrestling. So it started out with me and Derek, and continued with me and Dan Sandwich. But in Martins Ferry, Ohio, there were no two bigger heels than the Gambino Brothers. They just had nuclear heat, especially with the woman that ran the building that we were out of. Because Marshall, I think, got on the mic and called her a fat bitch one night. So from that point on,
what, Marshall?
Yeah.
No, not Marshall.
From that point on, there was a lot of heat there. But another set of guys, the two of them, Jimmy DeMarco, that I just had a blast working with. There are two really good stories that come out of this because I was working Jimmy DeMarco in a singles match one night, and he had me in like a chin lock or something, and I looked down, and I think he noticed it too at the same time. There was a piece of poop in the ring.
I think I heard about this story.
Yes. Someone at some point had procured a log and somehow transported it to the corner of the ring. Someone said later on that that someone had a puppy in the building, and that's where it came from. I saw no dog that night. I call bullshit literally on that story, but yeah,
or human shit on that story.
So I'd like to think that was the kind of heat that we had, that someone threw a log in the ring because they hated Jimmy Demarco that much.
Wow.
And then there was the night that we had a street fight. Things got a little chaotic. We were brawling all over the building, and I think I might have been paired off with Mickey or something, and we were fighting in the bleachers on the far side of the building, and all of a sudden I hear the bell ringing. I'm like, what's going on? We're not anywhere near the finish.
Mm-hmm.
And the building manager called the cops on them and said that, that they had, basically the cops are coming, the Gambinos had to leave the building. And she actually put the building up for ransom, saying after the fact that that we were not welcome back if the Gambinos continued to wrestle. So so they
I think I've heard a little bit of that story too.
So,
wow, from the other guys.
So they stopped getting used at that particular location. We still run shows, in other places on the Wheeling side or other towns in Ohio that they would still work for. But things kind of the relationship with the building manager continued to deteriorate for the next year. It came to the point where Rick decided to throw a Hail Mary, and the Gambinos showed up unannounced, unbeknownst to her, and that was the last time that we were at that building for a number of years until she was no longer in charge there.
That is, and not the only time that they've had the cops called on them. I understand.
I'm sure.
Yeah, no, yeah, I experienced one of those with Marshall at RWA. But I love it. I love it. So your travels were still very interesting. Either way.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my story comes down to PWX because that's what Pittsburgh fans know.
Yes.
But there's a lot outside of that that I was able to accomplish. I was fortunate enough to wrestle with a lot of people before they made it to WWE. Working for Kingdom James in Erie, Ohio, or Erie, PA. Sorry, I got to wrestle Beth Phoenix. A show in Ohio, I got to wrestle Michael Tarver shortly before he got signed. And a few after they had been in the spotlight as well. Buff Bagwell at Black Diamond Wrestling, which I have some Buff Bagwell stories there that maybe I'll get to at the end if we have time.
He seemed very interesting. I didn't know how to take him when we saw him last year at RWA.
And then the late Big Bully Busick for 5 Star Wrestling, and I guess that's another.
Well, so yeah, well,
we'll get.
Why don't we hold on a couple of those stories for the Patreon after the show? So if you are following us, and I'll put a plug out, patreon.com/Wrestling Mayhem Show. If you are interested in supporting what we're doing here on the podcast world, this is a nice tease. I usually don't tease it during this show.
Well,
but
5 Star Wrestling can be one show on itself.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, geez, yes.
Yeah, and I only worked 2 shows for him.
If I wasn't so opposed to shoot interview kind of things, we might just do a 5-star wrestling retrospective because just about everybody on the show has a story from over there. So, but I don't want to get into that right now.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, more about this. So you're working all these different places, and PWX, you had a few more years before you kind of checked out for a little bit, right?
So. Right around the time that we started running at the Jacob Wall Pavilion in McKeesport, the log cabin, I had an opportunity to break off and do something singles, and I at that point had felt like I had been buried and de-pushed and just treated like a joke for so many years that once I was given an opportunity, I took the ball and I fucking ran with it. I'm sorry, but I beat Mike Law Sabotage for the PWX Brass Knuckles title.
Mike Law, is that the one that we just got the promo from?
Yes,
from Fight Underground?
Colossal Mike Law,
Okay.
former ECWA champion.
Okay.
Very much looking forward to him being back in the Pittsburgh area for Fight Underground. It's been a number of years since I've seen him, and I love that guy. But I was the Brass Knuckles champion in PWX for like 8 or 9 months, and that was a gimmick championship where the heel could determine the stipulation, the champion. It was mainly a heel title because of this, but could decide the stipulation of the match beforehand or sometimes even during. And I ended up in a pretty long feud with Mantis. Not sure whatever happened to that guy, but
no idea.
It kind of culminated in a no DQ match. Very, very wild brawl. A lot of smoke and mirrors, but a lot of just a lot of nonsense that really got the crowd on their feet. And at that point, I was looked at in a different light after that performance. So then I kind of graduated from the Brass Knuckles title to the Three Rivers title, and was getting featured more prominently. Had some some really good feuds. Probably one of my favorite was the summer that I had a feud with Greg Iron over the Three Rivers title, which was a great story because he was looked at as such an underdog, especially with his handicap, and I just came in as this big bully. And he was able to put me in my place fairly quickly. I started by making fun of his handicap, making fun of his hand, and during a promo, he held up the Three Rivers title to taunt me with it, and I went to punch him in the face, and he moved, and I punched the title, and I broke my hand at that point. So I was wrestling in a cast for a number of months.
So you equally had a handicap.
Yes, I equally had a
great.
handicap. It was very ironic.
See, I didn't even know he wrestled regularly in the area.
Yeah, him and Matt Justice.
Wow.
From like 2009 to 2010 were regulars in PWX. So obviously he was the Three Rivers champion. I think him and Justice won the tag team titles at 1.2. But we had a really good feud, total really good story over that summer that culminated in a TLC match, which if you just kind of picture that in your head, it probably doesn't sound like it would be that great of a match given the two of us and our dynamic, but I think it's probably one of my favorite matches. I held the Three Rivers title for a couple of years. I think I won the title 6 times in total during my time in PWX. It was actually a feud with CJ Sensation that kind of put the office on notice. Another really good feud and really good story that culminated in an I Quit match. And I think that's probably another one of my favorite matches just because it was a breakout performance for me. We did a lot of violent stuff in that match, and it actually ended with me trapped in the ropes. Picture Andre the Giant and Ultimate Warrior. My arms are trapped, and he's getting ready to swing a steel chair at my head. And I'm like, stop. I stop him before he can hit me, and I take the coward's way out and say, I quit. So I give him the match, but not the satisfaction of just braining me with the chair. And then he just did so after the match anyways. I fall through the ropes like Terry Funk. But after that, I was kind of told that, there were a lot of things that were clicking with me and a few others, that we were capturing lightning in a bottle, I think were the exact words that were used. So that summer, it became kind of a 4-way feud between me, Ashton Amherst, Patrick Hayes, and Chris Taylor, where I inevitably won the PWX heavyweight title. In fact, I actually had the PWX heavyweight title, I think, and Black Diamond heavyweight title at the same time. So, I mean, that I think was just validation for all of the hard work that I had put in, all of the, all of the shit sandwiches that I ate, staying loyal for a number of years. So I think, that, kind of validated, why I was there. And, I had a really good time in PWX for a few years after that. until we got to 2013, and things kind of just fell off the wheels there. At that point, I had gone through a lot of changes in my personal life, and wrestling was becoming less of a priority. So PWX at that point was the only promotion that I was working for. And we were, or PWX was getting back on TV at that point, and I think this is really a point of contention for a lot of people because Jim Miller kind of put the fact that PWX was coming back to TV on a bigger pedestal than it should have been on, that it deserved to be on. It was a channel that that nobody got.
And it wasn't because I mean part of the success of the early days was it was nicely sandwiched between, I think at the time, WF Shotgun and ECW in the late night slot.
I was in Wheeling, West Virginia, and I got that. And it reached parts of West Virginia and parts of Ohio.
That was extensive.
It had a very good reach, but this time around it was on I couldn't even tell you what the station name was, but
WGN, I believe.
Yeah,
WBGN.
It wasn't available on Comcast.
Yeah.
I think it might have been available on Verizon Fios, but I mean back then, this was 2013. There wasn't as much of a
their headquarters is the next hill over, actually, from us.
No, I mean Fios just wasn't available in a lot of areas.
The station's headquarters is the next hill over from us.
Okay.
For that channel, they're still apparently running, but no, they're over the air and everything. Yeah, and I think they had just been dropped by Comcast around that time. And this is the same. This is the same channel that ran. That's how I discovered IWC. To be honest, in the mid 2000s. Was when they had a show running on there as well. So not unfamiliar, but still, it's like 2013. That's not the platform it used to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, there's a much farther reach today with just putting these shows out on YouTube and on social media.
As we've seen.
Yes. But I won the tag team titles for a fourth time with Robert Parker Williams as my partner, and injured myself in the match, actually twice that night. Earlier in the night, we had formed a heel group called Legion, consisted of, I might be getting this wrong, but I know it was me, Robert Parker Williams, Peyton Graham, and I honestly couldn't tell you who else. It was maybe Chris LaRusso, maybe Jack Pollock. I can't remember who the initial four were that started that first night. But we basically attacked Quinn Magnum and literally threw him out the front door. But I hyperextended my arm, catching Quinn Magnum for a dive. And ended up wrestling a tag team match later that night. And I don't know if I don't think it was because I was compensating for my arm, but I ended up injuring my leg very, very early on into the match. So I've been able to stay pretty injury free throughout my entire career, with one exception, and that's my left knee. So when I was 19 years old working at a fast food job, I slipped and fell in the kitchen, landed with my leg underneath me, and strained my PCL. I didn't tear it. It was a PCL injury, but I was out for 4 to 6 weeks. So fast forward to 2009. This was actually when I was doing the Greg Iron feud and had the gimmick on my hand. I woke up out of bed one day, went to stand up, and I guess my leg was asleep, and I just completely fell to the ground and landed with my leg under me again. Another PCL strain, out for another 4 to 6 weeks. This time, I step in the ring, I guess pivot and twist my knee the wrong way, strain my PCL, out for another 4 to 6 weeks. I finished the match, win the tag team titles, but then Apollyon has to take my place as champion for the next 2 events. And when I'm ready to come back, I'm told that I'm not needed. They're dropping the tag team titles that night to Quinn Magnum and T. Ranchula. I don't even get an opportunity to lose the titles, and I leave that night and don't come back. I still ended up working a few shows. I worked a show for Rock Parsons down in West Virginia. I worked an event. I can't remember the town in PA, but a number of the PWX roster was there, and they were like, "Oh, I thought you were hurt." No, I've been cleared to go for months now. And then, through working those shows, I end up getting in touch with Dr. Feelgood. He actually was my manager for one show, saw me cut a promo, and I guess was impressed and wanted to book me for RWA starting.
Feel bad.
Yeah. Sorry. Did I say
Yeah.
Feelgood?
That's another guy.
That's a different. Yeah. That's a different
guy in the area.
I did work for him for a number of years for APWF in Punxsutawney as well, and those were really fun shows too. They threw some really cool after parties.
Nice.
At their house after the shows. Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, so January of 2014, I'm supposed to debut with RWA, and I'm ghosted. At that point again, a lot of life changes outside of wrestling. 2013 was just a year full with a lot of politics, and I was just tired of dealing with all of it at that point. So I walked away from the business for until the summer of 2019, when Robert Parker Williams was working a program with Brohemoth and asked me to come back to help work with him and Zeke Mercer and some other guy I can't remember.
Yeah, and that was because I remember you from the little bit I'd watched PWX or been at PWX filming back in the day, and it was kind of cool to see you come back and get into it with Brohemoth and that whole mix there. What was that like? I mean, obviously this was back at PWX had transferred into this Fight Society concept. What was that experience kind of coming back and kind of mixing it up with the younger guys?
Yeah, it was a little surreal. Just being back in a locker room. Like I hadn't really talked with anyone. I kind of described wrestling as proximity relationships at that point.
Yes.
So even though I thought I had a bunch of friends in the business, didn't hear from any of them for 5 years, and then.
It's interesting what 6 months of COVID has done for a lot of us too.
But I mean, the great thing is I walked back in and got to see guys like Beastman, like Patrick Hayes, like Shirley Doe, Dean Radford. It was like we hadn't missed a beat, and that's I mean really for that's kind of what wrestling is all about. Is you can go years without talking to somebody, you see them again, and it's like it's like 5 minutes hadn't passed. But it was great getting to see a lot of old friends. It was great having an opportunity to make friends with a lot of new folks. And unfortunately with COVID, a lot of those have just been limited to meeting online.
Yeah.
One of the shows that I was looking most forward to do before COVID was Pit Fight.
Yes.
Not even so much that I was excited to work a match. I was going to be working with Jason Tyler and Phil Archer and Stevie LaBelle, which I was excited about. Because I thought that I could do some really good stuff with those guys. But more so, I was just happy to be in a locker room. I was happy to finally be able to meet in person guys like David Lawless and Ron Hunt and a lot of guys that that I had had brief discussions with online,
and especially those shows, because it seems just about everybody in the Pittsburgh area of any significance is on that show. Yeah. Great stuff that those kids are doing there out there. That's a University of Pitt Greensburg. I know they went down and we had them come in and we did a gaming night with some of the wrestlers to kind of make up for it and do some donation drive for them and everything. So it was just so unfortunate. It was right that weekend, I think, when everything shut down.
But I feel like even though I only spent 6 months, back in a locker room and have had very limited interactions with some of these other guys. I just you feel like them just as well.
So that transitions, of course, you're now part of Fight Underground.
Yes.
Now you haven't been a part of an actual show filming, and of course that's a little all over the place because of things. We've had one filming, we have another one on the books coming up here that I'm hoping you'll of course be in person for that. But you've been a big part of this Fight Council concept that has been kind of still driving this force with all the weirdness going on. Tell me a little bit about that experience too. Like you're basically on interacting and a live promo without the physicality, on a weekly basis here.
Yeah. I mean, I think very early on when the concept of the Fight Council was created,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, I think it was done to replace the damage that had been done with PWX and the Circle of Respect,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
was their version of a Hall of Fame that Jim decided to kind of tear down some imagery that was put out there in order to make room for I don't know, 3 seats. I forget the exact number of seats, but it was it was kind of treated as the Circle of Respect was done as a way to kind of induct in a Hall of Fame and show respect to those that had pioneered Pittsburgh wrestling, and it was it was kind of trashed by Jim. So I think with Fight Underground putting this Fight Council together, you'll notice that there are a lot of the same people
Yeah. Yeah.
that were part of that Circle of Respect, as well as some people that have that had been active in the business after that but are no longer active.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very happy to get the call to be a part of the Fight Council, and what started out as panel interviews and talking heads about about different aspects of the business and about Fight Underground has kind of turned into a very unique situation that we're in with a core number of the Fight Council members that are kind of acting as coaches, advocates, managers, whatever, however you want to take it, for different members of the roster, and that has kind of helped build to these next upcoming events, and just really give an opportunity to tell these stories without having the luxury of putting on shows or putting on matches.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a nice kind of like placeholder for that, and still getting the interest. And I think obviously, I think a lot of people came over from the old product, recognizing a lot of the faces that are popping up for me. But for me, and I think there's a lot of people that are just kind of getting into the concept in general, and it is kind of getting to know that Pittsburgh history. If you're not familiar with Pittsburgh wrestling, because I think there's a lot of people that watch from outside the area. But also like people that maybe you only watch the PWX, IWC, RWA, like there's and people seem to be coming from all over.
Yeah,
And
from Ohio, North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina, boomer from North Carolina, the other side of PA, and it's kind of interesting to see these long-standing personalities kind of interact with each other.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff. Just to close up here today, I like to ask a little bit. I'm gonna split this up I'm gonna ask you two versions of this question here.
Okay.
I usually ask people what is the best and the worst thing about indie wrestling.
I mean, for me, it's camaraderie. It's a sense of family. Wrestling really shaped a lot of who I was. I got into the business when I was 18 years old, at a very impressionable age, and a lot of lessons that I learned in a locker room or on a road trip kind of helped make me the person that I would become as an adult. So there's a lot of good to come of it, but there's also a lot of negative that comes from it, and honestly I think just thinking about it makes my brain hurt. So let's just say that there is a lot of negativity.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And what's the best and worst thing about doing a weekly panel with other veteran wrestling personalities?
I mean, I guess the best thing is it keeps me busy. At this point, I think I'm all but retired from in-ring competition. I never got a chance to do the send-off that I wanted, but I think at this point, I don't think that I need it. I don't, my ego. I don't have an ego to the point where I need to be validated. I can just kind of accept the last match that I wrestled as, the last match that I wrestled, and I'm fortunate
which was a pretty wild match.
It was, and I was supposed to, wrestle after that. I was actually going to return to Black Diamond Wrestling for their anniversary show in June, before the pandemic and before racism. But and I was going to make that my last match because I would have an opportunity to be back in front of my hometown crowd. But I'm happy on the note that I left it, and if I have the opportunity to get back in the ring, then so be it. But with no longer being an active competitor, it's still helping me I don't want to say keep relevant because that, again, that's another ego thing, but it's helping me, stay connected.
Mhm.
It's helping me work with a lot of younger guys. I drafted, in our Fight Underground draft, some guys that I've had a chance to have some really good conversations with and build some really good relationships with. So I'm grateful for that opportunity as well. I think that's probably the best thing.
Mhm.
And probably the worst thing is that there are often times where I just don't get to talk because either Bubba Brewer, Dean Radford, or Stacey Hunter is shouting over me. So I made a joke that I'm going to pre-tape my comments and have them aired during the Fight Council calls, and we'll see if it comes to that point.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. It's been a pleasure. Again, it's a really cool dynamic that's happened over there, and that's the fight council meetings that are every Thursday night, 8 p.m. on the Fight Underground channels, Facebook, but of course on the YouTube and Twitter as well. And of course, stick around. Hey, we're gonna if you haven't hit patreon.com/wrestling mayhem show, we're gonna have a little conversation after we're here and see what's Buff Bagwell really like. Dash.
Yeah. So two things. I want to tell my Buff Bagwell stories because
Yes.
It's multifaceted.
Okay.
And I want to tell my experience with 5-Star Wrestling. So
Okay.
those are going to be your Patreon.
There's your teases.
exclusives.
There's your teases right there. Can't give you all the good stuff here, right? But where can people follow what's going on with you online?
You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at The Big Deal DB for all 3 platforms.
There you go. Thank you so much, Dash, for joining us. Everybody, please go check out the stuff. Check out what's happening with Fight Underground. Again, the entire first Area 1 recording of Fight Underground is there for you guys over at the IndyWrestling.us for network. IndyWrestling.network for subscribers. You don't have to go find all the clips on the internet. It's all right there for you with the aftermaths, with the face-offs ready to go. And it's also over on the VOD platform as well and over on our Vimeo links. But hit all those links over at IndyWrestling.us. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you guys next time. Until then, please support Indie Wrestling. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.